Good afternoon. For this week's video blog, we looked at our digital identities and the behaviors associated with them, and also in comparison to our real-life identities. We also looked at how technology has played a role in impacting and developing our digital identities as well as governing them. When comparing digital identities to that of a real-life one, both are similar in that your actions are influenced by a particular social group. However, a digital identity differs from that of a real identity in the degree of that social group. Our real identities work with a much closer group with much stronger interpersonal communications, as our digital counterparts tend to range further outside this tight-knit group to include others that we may not readily accept into our personal lives, but will allow them to share in our digital identities. For example, examine once a list of friends someone may have on Facebook. While some of their friends list may include those in their real-life social construct, I would argue that the list goes way beyond that in most cases. Another question to ask would be, how much personal interaction would you be willing to have with each single person in your friends list on Facebook? Our digital identity allows us to range further into social groups than we may be comfortable doing in real life, and allows us to express what we feel we are to a larger crowd, many times in the hopes of gaining that crowd's acceptance. So how does technology help us to express a specific dimension of our identities? Technology has had a very large impact on the growth of social media and the creation of one's digital identity. We now seem to live in more of a Wi-Fi world that has us virtually connected at all times. The days of having to carry a laptop with you in order to gain access to the virtual world has been replaced with that of mobile connectivity. People can utilize their smartphones or tablets or other mobile devices to instantly access and connect and share their live experiences with the world through their social media groups and their digital identities. Pictures can easily be uploaded as well as videos, or political ideas or agendas can be shared in the hopes of generating ideas or other conversations. Our own virtual panopticon influences our design of our social posts. We know others are going to see our posts, but we really don't know exactly which people will be viewing it, if anybody at all. We craft our feelings and experiences to appeal to those we know will view them, but also add in levels of creativity to possibly intrigue those outside our core social groups. We in essence take the boring everyday activities that we experience and we try to make them seem larger than life to make our own identity seem much more interesting and intriguing to increase our social presence. This was very prevalent in the experiences Peggy Orenstein documented in her Twitter experience. The bottom line is that through our digital identities, we may be able to more truly express who it is that we think we are, and use that image to further mold our real-life personas as well. If my real-life identity is not living up to that of my digital identity, I may change things in my real-life day-to-day activities to more closely match that to increase my digital identity. Technology also helps govern us in a social media world. The idea that our posts or ideas are public, but are able to be connected back to us, influences our decisions on what you post and when. The fact that anyone may be able to read your posts or your social media feeds hopefully makes one think about what they are posting. I've encountered many students in my career that have expressed how things they have put on social media they've come to regret as they've come back to backfire and haunt them. Employers have begun using social media and looking at our digital identities as well as a way of pre-screening potential employees. Whether this practice is right or wrong is an argument for another time, but the fact certainly remains that it is being done and it needs to be aware of when you're using that digital identity in your social groups. This has led many people now to have multiple digital identities, one possibly that's strictly for professional use and one that's more for their personal, separating those two lives. The social group will dictate what they are willing to say or post and what they are intending, basically who they are intending to view it. Again, like the guards in the panopticons, someone will be viewing you, but you can't see into that guard tower, so you don't know who is viewing it. It may be a friend, a colleague, a potential new employer. Has my digital identity become a product of my social and technological context in my life? Well, similar to what Peggy Orenstein's experienced, I reflected on what I typically post and myself. For the most part, I tried to limit my digital identity, but it is greatly influenced by my social context. I find myself very often asking myself how my identity could be perceived negatively, and how it could impact things such as my employment. On the same note, I also tend to be more aware of times I can potentially craft a post for the audience in my everyday life, and the introduction of the smartphone is a great technological tool for this aspect. It allows a person to have a more spontaneous impact to their digital self as opposed to having to document it in their memory and then return later to craft a post on their laptop or their personal computer. Meaning, as an interesting life experience happens, the technological tools that we have available to us now allow us to more instantly and readily access our online digital identities and share that with our social groups. A real great example of this is, honestly, the camera itself. How many of us truly continue to carry a dedicated camera with us where we go somewhere? Recently, I took my son to a museum and found myself completely out of place in a crowd of people as I was holding my DSLR camera. As I looked through the group, I was the only one using a dedicated camera. The majority of the crowd, or the remainder of it for that matter, were using their cameras in their smartphones. Could this be due to its ability to quickly share their experiences through their digital identities and their social media? Possibly. After completing the readings this week, I certainly agree with the idea that our online identities are more like a performance rather than a reflection of our true selves. We can take the boring, ordinary aspects of our lives that typically wouldn't even be worth wasting the time to share with our personal peer groups and expand upon them to make something new and creative to draw on the attention of others in the digital world. This can also be flipped to impact our real life personas as well, and that if we're not doing things in our real life world that are willing to share, then perhaps we need to look at those and adjust our real world activities as well to make them more share worthy in the social groups. One interesting aspect of this is the ability to include visuals in the online environment. For instance, perhaps you're telling a friend in person about a sunset you watched. But in the online environment, not only can you describe that within a post, but you can also reinforce it by instantly sharing a photo of it that you took on that same smartphone or mobile technology that you're using to make that social post. However, at what point do we get where Orenstein was in and that we are beginning to stretch things out too far? Her comment about how often could I describe listening to E.B. White was really relevant. I think people begin to get bored posting their normal everyday activities and begin to try to evolve those activities into something different, either through real actions or those that they make up. While Orenstein was not prepared in her life to create lies or fabricate truths in her tweets, how many of us are in order to gain the acceptance or appraisal of our social media groups? The fact is, we think back to the panopticons, the guards are watching us. They're watching our behaviors, they're watching what we post. In many social groups, we're looking for the ways to make them happy so that they don't leave and migrate to other groups. In a public forum, anyone and everyone can see and experience your digital identity. This certainly impacts my use of social media and my digital identity. I may reserve myself from making comments or even liking certain aspects in the social media world in the thought that I don't want others to know my true feelings on this. It also may be out of the concern for the feedback I may receive from it, or the idea of maintaining a more professional aspect to my digital identity. This can affect my sense of who I am as a person. I begin to look more at my life for aspects that I may want to share through my digital identity, as well as begin to influence decisions I may make based on the feedback I've received through my digital presence. I do think in a modern digital age, one has to accept the presence of their digital self and maintain that along with the real world presence. I enjoy being able to share some of my personal experiences with those in my digital world through that of my social group, but there are some aspects of life that I would not share with anyone other than those that I have the close personal communications with. Digital identities can also become problematic when they start to become our sole personality and separate us from our real life entities. Sherry Turkle makes an excellent point about people being together but yet still being alone and getting lost with each other. Many of us have become dependent upon our digital identities and our mobile technology in order to support and maintain those identities. Many feel as though they can be more self-actual in these identities than in their real-life personalities. After time, I do agree with Sherry Turkle in the aspect that this will begin to erode the personal communication strategies that we need to have as a society and will begin to negatively impact our real-life identities as we continue to grow with our digital identities. Thank you.